The arena was electric. Not just loud, but alive. After months of speculation, months of cryptic social media posts, the whispers had finally solidified into a single, deafening reality. The opening riff of her theme hit, and the building didn't just cheer, it exhaled. It was a release of pent-up energy, a collective welcome home for the woman who had carried the division on her back before it was snatched away. Rhea Ripley walked through the curtain, and for a moment, the bravado was gone. You could see it in her eyes, just a flicker, the genuine emotion of being back. The "mommy" chants were a wave of sound, washing over her. They weren't just chanting a nickname, they were chanting for the stability she represented. She soaked it in, climbing the turnbuckle, her silhouette a symbol of power restored. This wasn't just a return, it was a coronation. The division had been rudderless, a ship without its captain, and now the rightful ruler had returned to claim her throne. The other superstars, the storylines, the championship picture, it all seemed to pause, to recalibrate itself around this single, undeniable center of gravity. She was the final boss, the standard, and her presence alone elevated everything. The cheers were for more than a character. They were for the athlete who had defined an era, finally back where she belonged. The ring was her kingdom, and the audience, her loyal subjects, were witnessing the restoration. It was a perfect wrestling moment, one of those rare instances where the line between script and reality blurs into pure, unadulterated emotion. The Queen was back, and then a different theme played. Familiar but unexpected. Liv Morgan, the architect of Rhea's injury, the woman who had been on a revenge tour of her own, walked out, but the unhinged chaos was gone. She looked calm, contrite even. The crowd's cheers faltered, turning into a low hum of confusion. What was this? Liv entered the ring, microphone in hand, and stood face to face with the returning queen. The tension was a physical thing. Liv's eyes welled with tears. She spoke of regret, of things going too far. She offered her hand. Rhea, skeptical but seeing the apparent sincerity, hesitated. Then Liv dropped the mic and pulled her into a hug. The arena erupted. Forgiveness, a new chapter, and then, boom. The embrace tightened and Liv's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, empty void. She snapped. It wasn't just a clothesline. It was an act of brutal, calculated violence. She slammed Rhea's head into the mat again and again. The cheers died instantly, replaced by a sickening, breathless silence. This wasn't the Liv they knew. This wasn't revenge. This was an execution. Security swarmed the ring, pulling her off, but she was smiling. A detached, serene smile. As they dragged her away, she looked back at Rhea's broken form. This wasn't a personal attack. It was a message. But who was the message for? And who was the sender? The show ended not with triumph, but with a question that chilled everyone to the bone. The feed cut to black, but the story was just beginning. Backstage, the scene was pure pandemonium. Producers were shouting into headsets, referees were scrambling, and the medical team was sprinting down the ramp. The other superstars who had been watching on monitors in the gorilla position were left in stunned silence. You expect chaos in this business, you expect betrayals, but this felt different. It felt cold. The narrative was shattered. Rhea's triumphant return, the storyline that was supposed to carry the company for months, was DOA. Announcers were left to fill the dead air, their voices trembling. They had no script for this. "What have we just witnessed?" one asked, his usual bravado completely gone. This is beyond personal." The fans filing out of the arena weren't angry. They were quiet, processing. They had come expecting a celebration and had instead witnessed a mugging. On social media, the Revenge Tour hashtag was hijacked. It was no longer about Liv's journey. It was about her horrifying destination. What kind of person does that? What had happened to her? The questions piled up, but there were no answers. In the locker room, the fragile alliances between superstars began to crack. If Liv, one of the most beloved figures, could snap so completely, who was next? Who was safe? The entire foundation of the women's division, built on Rhea's dominance, had crumbled in 30 seconds. A power vacuum had been created, and, as we all know, a vacuum never stays empty for long. It wasn't until hours later, when fans were re-watching the footage, that someone noticed it. A small detail, missed by the production truck. As Liv Morgan was being dragged up the ramp, her eyes flickered. Not towards Rhea, not towards the crowd, but upwards, towards the skyboxes. A fan with a smartphone, filming from the upper deck, caught what the broadcast cameras missed. In one of the executive suites, a woman was standing, cloaked in shadow, watching the chaos unfold. She wasn't cheering. She wasn't booing. She was just observing. As Liv looked up, the woman in the box gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The internet's digital detectives went to work. The image was grainy, but the profile was distinct. Within an hour, the photo was cross-referenced with celebrity events, martial arts seminars, and paparazzi shots. The name that emerged sent a shockwave through the entire sports and entertainment world. Rhea Seagal, daughter of the enigmatic and controversial action star Steven Seagal. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. This wasn't a random breakdown. This wasn't just Liv's revenge. This was a coordinated strike. The question, what happened to Liv, was replaced by a much more terrifying one. Who is Rhea Seagal? The media outlets, initially focused on Rhea's injury, pivoted instantly. Seagal's daughter eyes WWE, the puppet master behind Raw's most shocking attack. The speculation was rampant. She hadn't said a word. She hadn't thrown a punch. But with one single chilling nod, a complete unknown had just hijacked the biggest story in wrestling. The fallout was immediate. By morning, every major sports entertainment podcast, news site, and dirt sheet was leading with her name. Rhea Seagal. It felt strange to say in a wrestling context. This wasn't a second-generation superstar from a wrestling family. This was Hollywood royalty, but from a very different, very complicated kingdom. The skepticism was thick. Another celebrity signing, one podcaster groaned. She's just here to promote a movie. Does she even know what a headlock is? The discourse was dominated by her father. Commentators dug up old interviews analyzing his brand of martial arts, his controversial public image. They projected all of it onto her. She wasn't a person. She was a legacy. A gimmick. What's she going to do? They joked. Aikido throw, everyone? The pressure was immense. She wasn't just fighting for a spot on the roster. She was fighting against a preconceived notion, a shadow so large it threatened to blot her out before she ever stepped into the light. The company, however, was silent. They didn't confirm her signing. They didn't deny it. They simply posted the fans' skybox photo on their official social media with a single emoji, an hourglass. The message was clear. Time was ticking. While the world debated her right to be there, they missed the point. She wasn't asking for permission. The attack on Rhea wasn't an audition. It was an announcement. She wasn't knocking on the door. She was already inside, and she had already made the first move. Inside the walls of the WWE, the reaction was not one of excitement. It was one of fear. This wasn't Logan Paul showing up with respect and a desire to learn. This was different. The other women in the locker room saw the attack on Rhea not as a story, but as a threat. Rhea was their leader, the measuring stick, and she had been dismantled. But the fear was compounded by confusion. Liv Morgan, their friend, was now a ghost. She wasn't at the next show. Her number wasn't picking up. She had been disappeared, absorbed into whatever this new entity was. The veterans were furious. They saw a celebrity kid cutting the line, using one of their own as a weapon, and disrespecting the champion. "She hasn't paid her dues," was the whisper. She hasn't taken a bump. She doesn't belong here. But the younger talent, they were quiet. They saw the buzz. They saw the social media numbers exploding. They saw the mainstream attention. And they saw power. This new woman, Arissa, had done in one night what they had all been trying to do for years. She had changed the conversation completely. Management was walking on eggshells. Triple H, the man in charge, was in a locked-door meeting. The old way of doing things, paying dues, respecting the business, was clashing with the new reality of viral moments and needle-moving. Arissa Seagal was the human embodiment of that clash. She represented a hostile takeover, not just of the storyline, but of the very culture they had built. The next Monday, the show opened not with pyro, but with silence. The ring was empty, save for a single wooden stool. Arissa Seagal walked out, not in wrestling gear, but in a simple black GI. No music, just the sound of boos and stunned silence. She picked up the microphone and her voice was calm, measured, and utterly terrifying. She didn't yell. She didn't pander. She spoke. "For 20 years, she began, I have watched this place. You call yourselves superstars. You fight for championships. You entertain. But you do not combat." She paced, her movements fluid, like a shark circling. "You have mistaken performance for power. You have mistaken applause for respect." She then turned her attention to the Titantron, where a photo of Liv Morgan appeared. This one, she said, was drowning in the noise. She wanted revenge, but she was performing it. She was asking for your permission. I did not offer her revenge. I offered her clarity. Arissa explained that the revenge tour was a gimmick. The true path was one of discipline, of breaking the ego. The attack on your queen, she continued, was not an act of malice. It was an act of liberation. I freed Liv from the need for your approval, and I freed your queen from the burden of a crown she was no longer strong enough to wear. The crowd was furious, but her words cut through the noise. This wasn't a play for a title. This was a philosophical war. She was here to break the system. The promo ignited a firestorm. The world now understood. She wasn't her father's gimmick. She was his philosophy, taken to its most extreme conclusion. The media, of course, ran to her father for a comment. They expected a proud endorsement, "That's my girl." What they got was something far more cryptic and chilling. Through a publicist, a single-sentence statement was released, attributed to Steven Seagal himself. "The path of the warrior is solitary, and the master is responsible for the student's first step, but not their final destination." It was bizarre. It wasn't a condemnation, but it wasn't a celebration. It was a washing of hands. It was a master acknowledging that his creation was now loose in the world. This statement changed everything. The public realized this wasn't a coordinated PR stunt between father and daughter. This was a schism. Arissa wasn't just here to prove her father's martial arts were legitimate. She was here to surpass him, to take the quiet, philosophical code he preached in movies and unleash it as a literal, violent force. She was the walking, talking consequence of his entire life's work. The pressure on her doubled. She now had to prove not only that she belonged, but that her way was better. She wasn't just fighting the WWE roster. She was fighting the shadow of her own name, trying to redefine a legacy that the world thought it already understood. This was no longer about a wrestling angle. It was about a daughter's terrifying, singular vision. Weeks passed. Rhea Ripley was off television, recovering from an injury that was now all too real. In her absence, Arissa's philosophy began to spread. It started with Liv Morgan. She re-emerged, but she was not the Liv of the Revenge Tour, nor the smiling girl from before. She was silent. She wore a simple white G, mirroring her new master. Her matches were no longer chaotic brawls. They were precise, brutal, and short. She would dismantle her opponents with joint locks and cold, calculated strikes. The joy was gone. The mayhem was gone. This brings us to the present. The title of this video is "The Queen is Back." But the truth is, the queen we were expecting, Rhea Ripley, never really got the chance to return. Her kingdom was usurped before she even took her coat off. The other part of that title, Steven Seagal's daughter just took over WWE, is true, but not in the way we thought. She didn't win a Royal Rumble. She didn't cash in a briefcase. She just arrived. She took over the mind of the roster. And this is the part we all missed. We were so focused on the who, the famous last name, the celebrity connection, that we missed the what. We thought the story was about a father's legacy, but it wasn't. It was about a rejection of it. Steven Seagal became famous by pretending to be an invincible martial artist on film. His daughter, it seems, is on a mission to prove what real invincibility looks like, and she's using the world of sports entertainment as her canvas. The ultimate twist is that the attack on Rhea, the moment we all thought was the story, was just the introduction. It was the prologue. The real story is the silent war happening right now for the soul of the business. The queen, Rhea, will eventually return. But the kingdom she returns to, it's no longer her own. The queen in the title wasn't Rhea after all. It was Arissa. And her reign. It's only just begun.